now we have a very exciting módulo. Módulo número 4, module number 4, is about subject pronouns and verb conjugation. These are two of my favorite grammatical concepts, so I hope that you enjoy them as much as I do. Now, before we go into subject pronouns, let's discuss what a subject is in English. In an English sentence, the subject is the person or the thing who's doing the verb. Por ejemplo, Juan speaks. Juan is the subject because he's the one doing the verb. The dog runs. The dog is my subject because the dog is doing the verb. Now, sometimes we use what's called a subject pronoun. And a subject pronoun is simply a smaller word that substitutes for the subject. It's often more convenient. It helps us from being redundant. For example, if I want to talk about Juan, I could say, Juan is my friend. Juan is very nice. Juan goes to ETSU with me. But typically, I would start using a pronoun instead of his name over and over again as the subject. So usually I would say, Juan is my friend. He is very nice. He goes to ETSU with me. In that case, he is my subject pronoun. It's the pronoun that represents or replaces the subject. So we do the same thing in Spanish. And the subject pronouns are particularly important because they help us with verb conjugation, which we're going to get to in a few moments. So we have to first memorizar los pronombres, the pronouns. Yo is very important. It's the subject pronoun that refers to I. I am the person doing this action. Repiten, yo. Get your thumbs out. Do this with me. Yo. Now, tú means you. It's directed at the second person, you. And as we've already discussed, there are two different ways to say you in Spanish. And we'll go a little further with that in a minute. But just so that you know, tú is the you that we use with someone who's very familiar to us. Now, él is the subject pronoun that refers to he. Ella, she. And if you'll remember the pronunciación, the double L makes that Y sound, ya. Therefore, this is pronounced ella, not ella. Yo, tú, él, ella, and usted. Usted is an abbreviation for this word, usted. We use the UD. UD. It's very similar to this in English. We say Mr. in English all the time. It's a title for a gentleman, Mr. So-and-so, but we never see that word written out. We always use the abbreviation MR. That's basically the same situation over here with usted. We'll write out usted for now so that you remember the pronunciation of it, but when you see it written in Spanish, it will often be written in its abbreviated form, UD. And usted means you as well as tú, but this is the one that we consider formal. We'll discuss more about that in a minute. So we have yo. Now if you look someone directly in the face, you can say tú, yo, tú. Pick a guy, él. Pick a lady, ella. And remember, usted is very formal, so we're going to do a little curtsy. Usted. Yo, tú, él, ella, and usted. These are grouped together because they share one form of the verb. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So we have él, ella, and usted. This is our singular third-person group. Now we're going to talk about the plural third-person group. Ellos, which means they, and it refers to a masculine group, therefore the O, or a mixed gendered group. For example, if I had a group of ladies and gentlemen together, they would be ellos. But if I had a group of only ladies, they would be ellas. So they, masculine or feminine, is ellos, and the feminine version is ellas. This is third person plural. Now we also have in this category ustedes. And ustedes is simply the plural version of usted, but in this case it's not particularly formal. Ustedes just refers to you all in a plural way. Here in East Tennessee we use the expression y'all. So ustedes is pretty much related or pretty much represented by the word y'all. So we have ellos, ellas, and ustedes in our third person plural group. And then we're going to move over to the first person plural, which is nosotros. Can you see that? I'm getting a little crowded down there. Nosotros. Nosotros means we. And ladies, if we are a group of only women, then we would say nosotras. But if it's a group of guys or a mixed gendered group, then we say nosotros. So remember that these are our subject pronouns. They are the pronouns or the smaller words that we use to substitute our subject, for our subject, and they identify the subject in the sentence. So if you'll do this with me, this will help get some of these into your head. Think I and say yo. Yo. Ahora, tú. That's you. Somebody right directly in the eye. Tú. A gentleman, él. A lady, ella. And politely, usted. Ahora, la forma plural. Ellos would be two gentlemen or a mixed gendered group. More than one, not necessarily two. Ellos. And then we have the feminine version. Ellas. Y'all. Ustedes. That's everybody except me. Y'all. And nosotros is all of us, including me. So we would say we. Otra vez. Yo. Tú. Él. Ella. And usted. Ellos. Ellas. Ustedes. And nosotros. Those are our subject pronouns. Now, let's talk a little bit more about tú versus usted. La cultura hispana es muy importante. The Hispanic culture is very important to understand the language. And one of the aspects of Hispanic culture is el respeto. El respeto means respect. And it's very important. And it's so important that it's represented in the language in such a way that there are two ways to address a person in the second person. That means there are two ways to say you. One of them is tú. And tú is not rude necessarily. It's just the way that you address someone that you're very familiar with. It's not particularly respectful. It's just between friends or maybe family members, close family members, people who are close in age to you, or someone who is younger, like a child, for example. You would refer to them as tú. Tú means you in an informal or familiar way. Now, el respeto is very important in la cultura hispana. And so we have a whole different way to say you to someone that deserves that respect from us. And someone who deserves such respect would be either an authority figure, an elder, someone that we've never met before that we want to maintain a certain respectful distance from for a while, or someone in a position of authority like a boss or a judge or a police officer. You would always refer to them as usted. So remember, tú means you in a informal or familiar way. I would say tú to my child or tú to my best friend. But if I'm talking to my boss, I would call him or her usted. A police officer, usted. An elder, perhaps aunt or uncle that I want to demonstrate that respect for, usted. So because we have these two different ways to refer to someone in the second person, we have two different forms of the verb to go with them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Okay, una nota especial, one special note that I want to draw your attention to, is the fact that we have not covered the subject pronoun vosotros. And vosotros is another pronoun that refers to the informal plural of two. And the reason that we don't necessarily teach and test on this form is because it's only spoken in Spain. So more commonly, you will hear ustedes as the plural form of you in both formal and informal cases. I would refer to my children as ustedes, just the same as I would refer to an audience of people I didn't know as ustedes. Even though we would want to refer to strangers as usted and younger people as tú. So, vosotros is an important form to be aware of because you may come across it if you travel to Spain at some point, but we don't typically see it. Also, another special note about la forma de usted, the form of usted, it varies from country to country who would be considered usted and who would be considered tú. There are some places where children would refer to their parents as tú because they're familiar and they're family members, they're all close, and that's okay. And there are some places where the children would refer to their parents as usted, just to maintain that respect, that authority. I know that in Colombia, in particular, a lot of people use the usted form even with close family members. Even husband and wife refer to each other as usted. So it's important to note that for our purposes, it's very important to use usted if you're not sure, because you don't want to demonstrate disrespect by referring to someone as tú inappropriately.